Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Paz.
Hi, Tom. Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Donna. Hi, Paz.
Can you see me?
I can.
Okay, I don't see myself.
You look good, don't worry.
I'm like, how's this morning going?
Good. Excited to get our conversation started in a few minutes.
Good. I was going through the agenda right now.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, Donna.
Hey.
Good morning, Paz.
Let me see, how does this go? I don't know. Let me fix this. Chat participants. Huh. Oh, it's recording. Full screen? No. Full screen. How's immigration, Kate?
Kate, you're muted.
Thank you, Tom. Hannah told me to stay muted, so I was obeying.
You have to unmute to talk.
No, it's going okay. You know, Bus, right, that we got the funding to do DACA filing fees.
Yes, I heard. Is that through the CDSS?
It is indirectly from CDSS. So we're subcontracting with Chirla down in LA. Yeah. So that's really fabulous. So we've done, in April we did 40 checks, and we're planning to do at least, I don't know, I think 60 to 80 checks this month.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I've seen the flow of people coming in, and I'm like, wow, that's good.
Yeah, well, that was the one catch, is that they want us to be mailing the things for people because we're doing G28s on all of them, and so we have to have people come in and sign their forms. So we have a little bit of face to face.
Oh wow! How are the girls doing?
Okay, I mean, we got that window set up, so that's a huge bonus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank goodness we thought to do that window.
Well, that's good. How many do you need to do? Is it this a yearly, or is this just like?
It's while supplies last until the funds run out.
Wow.
So we don't know when that will be. They're supposed to give us a heads up in time so we can stop issuing checks and not issue checks we don't get paid back for. But
so you're helping filling out the application plus paying the $495.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow. And are you getting some reimbursement with both, or just the $495?
With both.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little weird because we were funded, under the CDSS. So now we've had to pause that. We're not reporting any DACAs to that contract. We're reporting to CHIRLA instead.
Okay.
But if the Supreme Court decision goes our way, we shouldn't have trouble meeting our numbers this year.
Right.
If it doesn't, well, that's a whole different conversation.
Yes. Now, did the CDSS finally release their funding or no?
Good question.
We're gonna be talking a little bit about that.
Good.
Yeah, I think so.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Well, keep up the good work.
Yeah, well, you too. I know you all are staying busy as well.
Yes, it's going well. They're out there doing a pop-up right now, and they have showers going on today for the homeless. So it's running smooth, and we're seeing between 30 to 40 homeless Mondays and Thursdays. So we have a team of 12 within Salud para la Gente, the health department, CAB, Bill Wilson's housing, I think it is, with Lupe. So there's like 12 of us, and they split. One goes and does outreach, and the other 6 stay in the site and provide the services. Yeah. And then Loaves and Fishes provides the lunch bags for them.
That's so great.
It's
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Zoom Thriving Immigrants Collaborative Community Conversation. People are still joining us. I'm trying to see what our numbers are currently. Let's see. We have 30 people joining us. Good morning, everybody. I know that people will be coming in. And I know that there's a lot of information for sharing, and thank you, Kate and Foss, for listening in and capturing some of the things that you're sharing. I think there'll be an opportunity for us to share a little bit later important news that each of our agencies or each of our programs are doing. So it is 9:03. We're going to wait one more minute so you have time to go get your coffee, get your notebook out, make sure your hair looks good on Zoom, whatever you got to do. We'll be starting in 1 minute.
Thank you, Daddy.
Bye.
Oh, they're here. Okay. You're not to unmute yourself, FYI. Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you.
Good morning. For those of you just trickling in, we're just waiting another minute for a couple other people to join us. Thank you for your patience. As a reminder, this meeting will be recorded, and I have everyone on. I've muted everyone, so if you'd like to talk, please unmute yourself as needed.
Buenos dias, good morning. We're going to get started, and we have 38 people on the line. And so we're going to do one big buenos dias, or one big good morning. We're going to unmute everybody, and we're going to say good morning all at once, okay? As cheery, as happy, as energetic as you can. Ready? Okay. Hannah, can you unmute us all?
Unmuted.
Excellent. 1, 2, 3.
Good
morning.
morning.
Good morning, everybody. That didn't sound like 38 people, though. We got to do it again. All right, we're going to try it again. I'm going to count to 3. 1, 2, 3.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. 30-second delay. Good
everybody.
morning.
Good morning. Welcome. So we'll go back and.
Oops.
Conversation, you can unmute yourself. So I'm Maria Elena de la Garza. I'm Executive Director to the Community Action Board, and we are thrilled to be hosting this Thriving Immigrants collaborative conversation as a follow-up to our Convergence, which, believe it or not, was quite a few weeks ago, right before our crisis COVID hit. And so we are very grateful that we had our Convergence, that we were able to bring the expertise, the experts, and the partners to the conversation. And today's conversation is about follow-up. It's about, you know, what did we learn through that Convergence, and what do we need to know about where people are in terms of serving our immigrant population. And also learning from one of our partner counties. We have a special guest with us today, Supervisor Alejo, will be sharing a little bit of information about what is the moving and the shaking that's happening in El Condado de Monterey that they're doing to support immigrants during this time. So with that, I want to give you a warm welcome, and I also have a hot off the press announcement that, as you may have heard yesterday, the state released the information for the disaster relief assistance for immigrants funding. The Community Action Board, our agency, will be serving Santa Cruz County, San Benito County, San Luis Obispo, and I'm missing one, Monterey County. And so we are tasked with helping facilitate that resource to our community. There is a 1-800 number that I'll put in our chat line. You'll also get it through communications throughout this week. And we are not allowed to begin accepting phone calls until Monday. But we want to get the 1-800 number to you, to your partners. But please understand that it will not go live until Monday. We have very strict protocols that we are asked to follow by the state. So good news that funding is coming, and we're thrilled that we get to be of service to help support facilitating that information and those resources. So I will put the 1-800 number in our chat line. And with that, I want to welcome you again and hand it over to Hannah.
Thank you, Maria Elena, and good morning, everyone. I'm so thrilled to see 46 of us here this morning. That's about a fourth of the participants in the Convergence. So I'm very, very happy to see you all. Just to get us started, I'm going to be launching a quick poll. Answers should be anonymous, and if you're joining us on a computer today, you should be able to just click the buttons here. I will launch that. Is everyone seeing that pop up on their computer?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you, Kate. So I'll be able to track those live. We just kind of wanted to get a feel for who was in the room. And I just wanted to provide a couple reminders. Again, this meeting is being recorded. So just note that. And then I will have everyone muted. So if you'd like to talk, please unmute yourself. And also we will have a short section for question and answer at the end. So if you think of something as you go, please just type your questions into the chat box. Wonderful. So I'll just go through our agenda quickly. Today, we're going to get started again with that quick poll. Give a little bit of an introduction on who the Thriving Immigrants Collaborative is as we're still emerging in our community. Go over a couple of the ideas that were generated by you all, community members at our convergence in February. We're also going to have some time, some of you might have seen, to come prepared to speak about what it is that you or your agency has been doing to support immigrants during this time and what kind of support you might need to push that work forward. So we will have a section where we will be expecting to hear from all of you. So please be ready to share. And then we will pass it over to County Board of Supervisors, Luis Alejo, to give us a brief kind of overview of the current reality of immigrants in the Monterey Bay Area. Give an overview of certain proposed pro-immigrant policies that we might want to take on and advocate for as TIC. And then, of course, explain to us a little bit more about what the concrete next steps Monterey County has taken to support immigrants in their COVID response. Towards the end, again, we'll have questions and we'll be, I'll ask everyone to vote on what they think TIC's and Santa Cruz County top 3 advocacy priorities are for the upcoming months. Just wanted to give context for our speakers today. We've already heard from Maria Elena, Executive Director of CAB. My name is Hannah Rogers. I'm the Assistant Project Director of our Thriving Immigrants Initiative here at CAB. We'll also be hearing briefly from some of the other dedicated TIC steering committee members, Paz Padilla with CAB, Tamara Arellano Mora with Salud para la Gente, Edgar Landeros from Community Bridges, Adriana Mata from PVPSA, Kate Hinnenkamp from CAB, as we've mentioned, Luis Alejo. So just to provide a little context, who is TIC? I know it looks like from the poll, about 65% of you attended the convergence. So hopefully you have some idea of who TIC are. But really, we are an alliance of organizations that has started in South County that is really aimed on providing direct services to and advocating for our immigrant community so we can create a community that's actually welcoming for people and is actually supportive for them to thrive regardless of status. In February, let's see, as you can see the logos on our screen, we've got current TIC steering committee members consist of Community Action Board, Community Bridges, Monarch Services, CIMA, PVPSA, Salud para la Gente, Catholic Charities, Watsonville Law, and Pajaro Valley Rapid Response, which is a grassroots organization locally. During our immigration convergence in February, I also wanted to mention that as part of the model for TIC, we've started with this steering committee in South County to try to address immigrants in South County, but we are very much intending to spread throughout the county, and we very much view you all as community supporters and participants of TIC, and we're excited to offer some opportunities throughout the upcoming months to have you continue participating in this effort. As you can see, Thriving Immigrants, we organized around a vision to have a united, thriving, and equitable community built on our diversity and shared history of migration. We are all about trying to enhance the quality of life and advance the rights of immigrants, of our immigrant community through advocacy, organizing, and alignment of services. And our core values, as you can see, are dignity, justice, and equity that we try to bring throughout all of our work. As I mentioned briefly, Thriving Immigrants Collaborative put on Santa Cruz County's first ever immigration conference in February. during this conference, we had hosted 7 different breakout sessions, all of which had different topics and how they relate to supporting immigrants. So we're going to hear a little bit more from some of the ideas generated during these breakout sessions. And I would say, just in reviewing the notes from all of these amazing conversations that took place in February, I think what I was most struck by was people's true understanding of the intersectional nature of this work, and for our need to actually address the pro-immigrant movement and address immigrants' rights from a holistic perspective. You know, as you can see, each of these issues are intimately connected to the other. And, you know, in order to improve housing and food security for immigrants, we need to ensure that we improve economic opportunity as well. So I'm gonna pass it off to one of our steering committee members, Paz Padilla, to give us just a couple quick ideas on what it was that came out of the housing and homelessness breakout session.
Perfect. Thank you, Hannah. Buenos dias. Good morning, everybody. I just a little bit of overview of what happened during our housing session. We had roughly around 20 to 25 individuals participating. It was very interactive. People were really speaking up the needs and the successes and the next steps. We had wonderful speakers. They all knew what they were talking about. They all really nailed the need that we're seeing here in Santa Cruz County. So it was a really good turnout. It was a short time. It was really little with all the conversation that we had, but I'm just gonna nail it into 2 points really briefly, because I know it's just 2 minutes and we need to move on. We address eligibility requirements for housing support and make them more inclusive for all our immigrants' status. In this part, they talked a lot about advocacy. How can we do advocacy at a federal level, since a lot of the housing support funding is federal? And how can we advocate to make this happen in our local level, like our local founding housing for our safety nets programs independent from federal aid? And the second part of the advocacy is how can we omit the Social Security number requirements on applications that local service providers have control over them. That was a big discussion, knowing the reality that most of our community don't have Social Security numbers, and these federal grants we need those Social Security in order to help. The other part that we spoke about was how do we work collaboratively to promote and protect tenants' rights? I think with the new memorandum going on, this is a really huge need that we need to advocate. We need to really understand that the tenant and the landlord needs to understand what this really means. Coming from the perspective of being the director of the Housing and CAB, I will let you know that one of the things that I'm seeing since we started this COVID-19 is a lack of communication of what the memorandum really means, especially to those tenants and the landlords. Most of the landlords who don't have the capacity of really understanding what it means. So those that really don't know the language, who have very little literacy knowledge, most of them really do not understand what this memorandum is, what is the rights for them, and what, the communication they have to have with the landlord. So this is a perfect segment to working collaborative to promote and protect tenants' rights. I think so, and also advocating to the landlords, advocating to increase rental protections that are inclusive for all immigrant status, and making sure that all renters in our community know their housing rights and where to go and get the help. And again, literally this memorandum is one of the evidence where we really need to promote and make this happen, because this is a really lack of a situation that we're facing right now with our housing and homeless situation currently during this COVID-19.
Thank you so much for sharing, Paz. I'm going to pass it over to Tamara Arellano Mora to speak a little bit about what came out of the grassroots organizing breakout session in February.
So hi all. Yes, I'm just como Paz dijo, it wasn't really for me the breakout session that I attended was a grassroots organizing, and to me, it was really successful. I really enjoyed the diversity of people's comments and perspectives. And I will also be sharing 2 of the main points that came out just because of lack of time. One of the things was really, as Hannah was mentioned that we want to focus on a more holistic approach. So that means that we really want to focus on the individual, the person, their experience. So we want to meet people where they are at. And amplify their voices to help create, a community that values people over race. That was one of the big issues that came out in this conversation, because, we're always so focused on these characteristics of people that have been given way too much value. So focus on the individual rather than, placing that much emphasis on race or immigration status, and focus on designing or organizing in a way that best fits our community. Some examples that came out of this point was meeting people over coffee rather than like in an office or, in these standard settings that are normal. They may be normal to us, but not so much for our community, especially if they don't feel comfortable with the language or just the bureaucracy of all this. And then as well as creating opportunities to get involved with students, their education, but in a way that accommodates to their work schedule. Like in reality, our students, they're not just students. They just don't go home or play sports or whatever. Like they also have to work. They are really good at time managing because of all these responsibilities that have been placed on them. So meeting them where they're at, if we have to kind of travel to their work or meet them near their work at a coffee shop to discuss something, then let's do that. The other point that I want to discuss is attendees emphasize the need to collaborate with all sectors, similar to what we're doing now. And some examples that came out of that were engaging the broader immigrant community by meeting people where they're at to truly listen and serve, quote, serve as a bridge to connect and moralize, unquote. Similar to what I previously said. Also calling on faith leaders, government leaders, and nonprofit leaders to become stronger leaders in the immigrant rights movement, as well as engage employers in advocacy efforts to join advocacy and or to ensure enforcement of immigrant and worker rights.
Thank you so much, Tamara. We really appreciate hearing about the grassroots organizing. I'm going to pass it off to Edgar Landeros from Community Bridges to speak a little bit about a couple ideas that came from the Poverty and Economic Development breakout session.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So in the Poverty and Economic Development breakout session, 3 major ideas came out of it. One of the ideas in this session that came out was really emphasizing the need for equity and opportunity in our financial practices. So what this meant was to increase language access in our financial institutions, and most specifically in the financial literacy and component of it. Like, for example, creating more materials in non-English languages, as well as the translated material that's already there, maybe simplifying it to language that's a little bit more easier to understand for our community members. And also another point that came from this was creating like a financial promotoras model who can coach people on personal finances in culturally relevant ways. So, kind of leading this model where these individuals will gain knowledge and then they will go out in the community and kind of advocate and teach their peers about it. Another relevant point that came out of this workshop was to advocate for AB 1593, the Cal EITC. This bill, what it is, it aims to allow low-income undocumented individuals to receive the California Earned Income Tax Credit. This tax credit has been proven to help impoverished families survive, while tax-paying undocumented people don't currently qualify for it. So what it would allow is for them to also qualify and earn this income tax, since they are contributing into our local economic system. And then, of course, the last point that came out of it was to promote more equitable ways to save for retirement and pass on money after death, including promoting programs like Cal Savers, which is a statewide personal retirement plan available to people whose employers do not offer workplace retirement plans. So planning more for the future. A lot of our undocumented families don't really have a means to plan for the future or aren't provided tools to do that. So in this workshop, that conversation kind of sparked up and came out of it, just to be able to save for rainy day funds like right now that we're experiencing with COVID-19. So those were kind of the major talking points in that discussion.
Thank you so much, Edgar. Those are some really important points. I'm going to pass it off quickly to Adriana Mata from PVPSA, who will be speaking a little bit on some ideas that came out of the public health breakout session.
Buenos dias, good morning, everybody. So some of the things that came out from the health breakout session were that the participants were, they really emphasized on improving health for the whole person beyond the treatment of symptoms by addressing social determinants of health. As we all know, social determinants of health refer to the many external factors in a life that impact somebody's health. For example, living in poverty, not having access to food, or not having a home. And we all know that these, issues can increase somebody's stress level. They also talked a lot about advocating for more medical legal partnerships between our health service providers and trusted legal experts. And these medical legal partnerships would help address health patients' legal issues in a streamlined, client-focused way. They also spoke about advocating to expand doctor work hours so that people who were generally unable to take time off from work during the week can have access to non-emergency medical care, and emphasize the preventive care. As we know right now, our local health clinics are working around the clock to ensure that our communities have access to healthcare. And that was some of the things that they also really emphasized, that we need a little bit more of that, and how we can best, as a community, support the needs of our immigrant community. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. So important. I'm going to pass it off briefly to Kate Hinnenkamp from Community Action Board, who'll speak a little bit on our education breakout session.
Good morning, everyone. We had a great session on education at the Convergence. Our speakers were County Education Superintendent Ferris Sabah and Ruby Vasquez from PVUSD. And we also had the president of Cabrillo that sat in on the session, which is exciting to have him in there. Some of the main ideas that came out were around the need to engage the immigrant community, especially youth and families, when discussing policies and practices that will most impact them. So, it seems obvious, but we don't always do it. Rather than deciding for people, decide with people. Talk to people and find out what it is that they want, what it is that they need to be successful. And that involves advocating for opportunities to engage families in their children's educations that are linguistically accessible, right? And we've all been to those meetings where there's an interpreter kind of standing by, which is great. I mean, it's better than not having that, but really thinking beyond just paying the interpreter to be there for 2 hours, but how do we really make it linguistically accessible? Does it make the most sense to have meetings simultaneously held in Spanish and English? Would it be better to do breakout sessions where people could talk with people of their own language group? Thinking that through. Accommodate the schedules of working families, and provide spaces to pass the mic, and most importantly, probably listen. We also talked about the need to advocate for more educational resources, including, and this is interesting, I was seeing this in the notes, talking about remote learning tools and support. And that seems like it was almost like a little extra or an afterthought back in February, and suddenly remote learning tools are everything. And we all know that unfortunately the same students that show up at school in person with a lot of barriers around language, around economics, around not having necessarily academic support at home. Those students are even more disadvantaged right now during the shelter in place. So thinking through how we can do that better moving forward. Being culturally relevant and accessible to the immigrant community. And then we talked some about professional development for teachers and other educational staff, making sure that educational programs are culturally responsive to the immigrant community. And I know Ruby talked a fair amount about how to, really meaningfully engage parents, and that teachers, we kind of assume that teachers know how to engage parents, but it doesn't come naturally to everybody. And especially when the teacher and the parent are from two different language backgrounds or two different cultural backgrounds. So really thinking through how we can prepare educational staff to do that better.
Wonderful, thank you, Kate. I'm gonna pass it off quickly to Maria Elena to speak a little bit about the food security breakout session.
Thank you. So there were 3 main points that came out of that session. One was suggestion that we advocate for all essential work to be valued and paid a living wage. Attendees suggested that we advocate on a local level to move toward a food system where farm workers own their own labor via co-ops and land trusts. The second point was to empower communities with knowledge and decrease stigma of food access programs by promoting available food resources through creative and culturally responsive outreach campaigns, and by which programs immigrants of all status could qualify for, and which ones can sometimes affect immigration status under public charge. So to have some clarity and some targeted understanding of those differences. And the last point that was brought up in that breakout session was to help advocate for the federal policy HR 641, the Agricultural Worker Program Act of 2019, which would establish a program for farm workers to obtain temporary resident status and pathways to permanent resident status. Those were the 3 points that came out of food security session.
Thank you, Mariana. I know we're flying through there just because we're short on time. I hope everyone is taking a few breaths to kind of integrate some of this information. There's a lot of great ideas. I'll see if I can share them on the screen with you again towards the end. I'm just going to tie it with our last breakout session on climate justice, where the focus was really, the major themes were really that we shift from broad scale farming to small, regenerative, pesticide-free farming that's based around the community needs, and that emphasized worst. There was a specific call to advocate for financial support for this transition, as we know that there's a lot of, there's a lot of big subsidies to agricultural companies that kind of make the field unlevel, you could say, for small farmers. So actually advocating to finances to support this transition to smaller, organic, community-based farming is something that attendees were really suggesting. Another thing would be to advocate for better working conditions for agricultural workers, including poison-free soil and crops, increased health and safety precautions, which we, as we all know, are always relevant in line of work, but are even more so now during COVID. And then, of course, legal protections against wage theft and on-job abuse that we see far, far too often in that community. So again, a lot of ideas generated in those 7 breakout sessions back in our convergence in February. I think what I was, again, really struck by was the intersectional nature of all that, and really people's acknowledgement that we need to focus on the how of your organizing, not just what it is that we're doing, not just what it is that we're advocating for, but how it is that we're engaging our community and how it is that we're being most responsive to their needs. So taking a moment to integrate all those wonderful ideas in the transition over to hearing a little bit from you all about what it is that, well, I'll pass it off to Kate Hinnenkamp to introduce that and kind of guide that discussion, but we're hoping to hear from you all so we understand A, what it is that's happening in our county, and then B, understand what it is that we have to build from.
Thanks, Hannah. So with your permission, I'm hoping that I might be able to call on a few people. And if you don't feel like sharing this morning, please feel free to pass. I do see that there's some comments in the chat box around that some people are having the video feed cut out on them. And I just saw Gina Linghout suggesting that if people are not currently speaking, if you want to pause your video sharing, that might help the video to flow more smoothly. So you might want to try that. So the questions that we have up here are, what are you or your agency doing to advance the pro-immigrant movement and support immigrants during the COVID response? And also, what kind of support do you or your agency need to move the work forward? So I did see Gina Linghout and Steve McKay from UCSC both on the call. Do one or both of you want to address those questions about what's going on at UCSC right now?
I can't see Steve, so I don't know if he wants to speak. I feel like I can say a little bit more about maybe what's going on in my field, but I should also just mention, if you all don't know, that Pablo Reguerin just took another job at UC Davis, and he's been the person who's been leading a bunch of the work on our campus around immigration-related justice issues. So that's been sad news. We just found out yesterday that that has happened. So that position will be vacant for a little bit, but the campus also just maybe last week hired another person. We had had a vacant position for quite some time, and it was the person who is oversees the AB 540 undocumented students. So that position has now been filled. I think that the campus has been sort of swallowed by trying to think about, you know, the pandemic. So I haven't seen a lot coming out. There hasn't been a round table this quarter. So I don't know that there's a lot to report back there, but I also want to report that one of the professional societies I belong to, the Society for Community Research and Action, we have an immigration justice working group, and we just submitted to our society a policy brief that we wrote about resistance in immigrant communities and how settings, lots of settings like educational settings, nonprofit, grassroots, what those organizations can do to better promote resistance and resilience. So that's, it'll be kind of it doesn't take super long for that to kind of wend its way through the bureaucracy of our professional society. But once that's approved, then it will be, I can distribute that publicly if people would find that of interest. And I don't know if Steve maybe has more information than I do about what's happening at UCSC.
That's great. Thank you, Gina. Steve, are you still on the line, and did you want to say anything? All right, well, we'll move on. Jump in if you want to.
I think
yeah, what's that, Hannah?
Just saying he mentioned he had to step out early, so it might be that he's left us.
Okay, not to worry. Yeah, I think something that Gina said is important around that, you know, especially in a time of crisis. And I think this is one of the big reasons why the Thriving Immigrants Collaborative was launched, is that, you know, there are task forces and groups were focused on specifically immigration issues, but what is missing a lot of times, especially when a crisis happens, is remembering that community in everything we do, right? That it's not just we go over here and talk about immigration issues, but then later we're talking about health issues or education issues or economic development issues. And sometimes we forget to, in a county where we have such a large population of immigrant families, to think about them in our decision making, all the decision making that we do. And so, yeah, the crisis happens, and I mean, I saw that with the schools, and don't get me wrong, the schools are doing an amazing job responding, but it was like, okay, we got to get Chromebooks out to everybody, and then okay, everybody, we got them Chromebooks, we got them Wi-Fi or online access, so now we've solved the problem. But of course, that's just a tool, and there's lots of families that don't know what to do with a Chromebook, or so there's a lot more that needs to be done. And I know that a lot of our local schools are really stepping up and managing that, but we constantly have. Yes.
Hey, I actually have one more thing I can report. It's not good news. I thought about it as you were speaking, but I think you all might know that on the UC Santa Cruz campus, there had been a Wildcat Strike that had gone on for quite some time. And part of that was that the students were working with another group around COLA for all. So, living wages and money for house and food for everybody. And part of their work in that was doing things like what they were calling liberating dining halls. So allowing people to come in to eat for free who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford to eat in the dining halls. And the campus, even amidst all of this COVID pandemic and, basically telling all students that they should leave campus if they can, the campus has continued to bring in students for conduct meetings. And one of the groups targeted was the Undocumented collective on our campus. So there's a group of us who have been providing support to these students, and they're being called in for a sit-in around the resources for them on campus. They're being called in for these dining hall liberation events, and it's kind of incredible that the campus has just been continuing to do this, in the midst of everything else going on. And it's been very stressful for the students. And we've had several students who have, been sick and been kind of forced to do these Zoom meetings. And so the decisions are starting to roll out now. But it's just a lot. So I felt like I should mention that in the space too.
Interesting priorities in these times. I also saw Laura Segura from Monarch on the line. Would you be able to share, Laura, a little bit about what is going on at Monarch right now?
Hi, good morning. Thank you. So for Monarch Services, we've been doing quite a bit of work around responding to the increase in calls around domestic violence, and people have been hit really hard with that. And so we're really concerned, not only right now with the rise in domestic violence in families, specifically families who are more high risk or at risk, and that includes our immigrant and undocumented population. And so that is something of great concern for us, and we're doing everything we can to respond to it. And we know that in the next 12 months, as the economy gets worse, then we're going to see more of an uptick in calls for our assistance. We have a program called Campos Seguros, Safe Fields, that we have had in the past where we go out and do outreach to farm workers. That's on hold right now because we don't have enough staffing for that, but we're hoping to bring that back so that we can proceed and reach out to folks. Right now, we're hoping with our few staffing that we have to partner up with other organizations to do outreach. And I know the city of Watsonville is doing some of that outreach right now, so we're trying to join those efforts as opposed to us kind of going out there on our own. And so most of our services are being folks know about us because of word of mouth. We used to be called Defensa de Mujeres, and before we changed our name, so people know who we are, and we provide rental assistance and all the other things that other agencies are providing as well. So that's pretty much what we're doing right now, but again, very concerned about the rise in domestic violence. in families right now.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you are doing. It's crucial every day, but it's especially crucial right now. Hannah, how are we doing on time? Do we have time to hear from one more?
Yes, I'd love to hear from
agency, or do we need to move on?
Yes, please. If there's someone else willing to share, I'd love to hear.
From one more? I saw
Yes,
Arenda.
thank you.
Oh, okay. I had started to call on Arenda from Head Start, but I also see Rebecca Garcia's hand. Let me check in with Arenda and see if she has anything to share, and then we'll go to Rebecca.
Thank you, Kate. And I'll be very brief. Just before we went into shelter in place, we actually had been working with Paulina. We drafted a safe space policy for our preschool centers. And this came from feedback we got from our policy council parents, really after all the raids that happened in the last year or so, fearing about the possibility of ICE entering our sites. And so we developed a policy and a protocol, and we're about to get some training from Paulina for our managers, who would be the point people to have the skills and the knowledge of what to ask for in a warrant, and make sure that if ICE ever showed up at one of our sites, we would be prepared to deal with the situation. And Encompass-wide, we are working on a resiliency initiative, and one of the action steps there is to implement the safe space policy across the agency so that it applies to any of our sites at Encompass, whether it be a residential home or one of our preschool centers. And currently, one of the things that we're doing is we are doing weekly and sometimes bi-weekly wellness calls to our families. So our big job for us is really the referral process. So we refer to the Monarch Services, to CAB. And so we have a system in our case management where we can identify families that share with us stressors around their immigration status. And so those are the families that we're prioritizing. And in terms of long-term planning, one of the key things, like you mentioned, I was part of the education group at the Thriving Community Immigrant Communities event, is really looking at our systems to make sure that our systems are set up not just for those children that show up to class every day, but they're actually set up for the children that can't show up to class every day. As we saw when we had the immigration raids, a lot of the little kids were not coming to the centers because there was so much fear. So that's where some of the remote work conversation happened. And I want to stop using like, oh, we're doing this exception or these extra services. I want to make sure that we're saying like these services are in place. And it's not something extra or something different that we're doing. So that's one of the pieces that we're thinking about and grounding ourselves in as we're planning for reopening and for future services.
That's amazing. Again, crucial work every day, but especially right now. And what a challenging group to stay in touch with, our preschool kids, but it's inspiring to hear you guys are doing it. It's sobering to hear that families are still thinking about things like ICE raids, like amongst everything else that's happening. But those are the times we're living in. Thank you, Anita. Okay, Rebecca, do you want to wrap us up talking a little bit about what you're working on?
Thank you very much, Kate. As you all know, I am the current mayor of Watsonville, and quite frankly, I'm very proud of the work we're doing to help all our residents within the city of Watsonville. And as you know, our residents include a high rate of immigrants and farm workers. And I'd like to share what we're doing in two categories. One is in policy and the other is in funding. In regards to policy, Watsonville was one of the first local jurisdictions that passed a moratorium to prohibit evictions of residential and commercial renters. Now that resolution or moratorium was only until May the 31st. So at our May 22nd 26th meeting that we'll be having, we'll have to make a decision again whether to extend that moratorium or not. And as you can imagine, the landlords are trying to put pressure on us to not extend it because they're feeling a loss of revenue. And so a decision is going to have to be made on the 26th. I'm very, very hopeful that we will extend it. The other is at our May 26th council meeting, I have asked for a resolution to ask the governor and the legislature to repeal SB 872, which prohibits the local jurisdictions from taxing sugary beverages. And as you know, in Watsonville, we have a high rate of obesity and diabetes, even during this pandemic. And many of those that are affected by that obesity and diabetes are our immigrant families and low-income families. And so I am hoping that the resolution will pass, but you know, it takes 4 votes to make that happen. So that's what we've been doing in terms of policy. In terms of funding, through the Federal CARES Act, our CDC department received several $100,000, which we in turn distributed to our partners in the community, to CAB. And I don't remember the exact amount of funding, but we gave funding to CAB to enhance their housing program that they have. To the Pajaro Valley Community Development Corporation, we gave them funding so that they could give business grants, because as you know, our small businesses in Watsonville, mom and pops, they're suffering a lot. Some have actually already closed. And then we also gave funding to Second Harvest, because you know Second Harvest has been overwhelmed with the amount of food they're having to distribute. So we gave funding to Second Harvest to help them with that food distribution. And then just last week, we had a farm worker relief where we asked our community to donate baby essentials and masks. And as a result, we were able to give to a few hundred families, a couple hundred families, those products of baby essentials and masks. So basically that's part of what we've been doing. And actually I really have a long, long list of other things, but those are the primary functions that I'd like to share with you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's really exciting to see how the city of Watsonville has stepped up to support immigrant families at this time. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm handing it back to Hannah to move us to our next item.
Thank you, Kate. I'm actually to Maria Elena, who's going to introduce Luis El Alejo, who's joining us this morning.
Hi, good morning, Luis. Welcome. I don't see you on my little screen. But I'm hoping, there you are. Nice to see you this morning. I have the honor and the privilege to introduce Supervisor Luis Alejo. He was elected in June 2016 to represent District 1 on the Monterey County Board of Supervisors. His district includes most of the city of Salinas, including Alisal, Central North Salinas, Chinatown, and part of Old Town Salinas. Mr. Alejo serves on the executive board of the California State Association of Counties and is the past president of the Latino Caucus of California Counties. He also serves on the county budget, legislative cannabis, health and human services, equal opportunity, military and veterans affairs, remote access network, human resources and health, housing, and human services committees, to name a few. Mr. Alejo authored numerous landmark pieces of legislation, including the bill to raise the minimum wage to the highest level in the county, that was AB 10, and to allow undocumented immigrants to obtain valid California driver's license, AB 60. Yay, thumbs up, warms my heart, Luis, that one especially. And to create the first statewide ethnic studies model curriculum in the nation, AB 2016. Over 6 years in the Assembly, 68 of his bills were signed by Governor Jerry Brown, and 18 resolutions were approved by the legislation. As a result of his work, Mr. Alejo was ranked 2013 most effective Democratic Assembly member by the Around the Capitol Nooner and was awarded the 2015 Legislator of the Year. We are thrilled that you're on the call with us, Luis. We're proud that you are homegrown, and we are excited to hear about what you're moving in our sister county.
Thank you, Maria Elena, and to everyone at CAB and Paulina for inviting me. Yeah, it's good to see the big coalition, over 50 people on this line. So it's pretty impressive, from elected officials to a lot of community-based organizations. It's really proud of Santa Cruz County, where I grew up, and seeing the collaboration going on. Even though I represent Salinas now, I always tell people, even here in Monterey County, that I'm always proud of my hometown in Watsonville. But they wanted me to speak on a few points. First of all, what's the outlook for our Latino and immigrant communities, at least in Monterey County? And it's something that we monitor every day as our daily numbers come out. And the numbers are troubling. Just in Monterey County, yesterday we reached our highest point. Even though Latinos are 59% of the population, they account for 75% of those who are tested COVID positive. 65% of all the cases are coming out of the Salinas area. And of course, it's the largest city in the Monterey Bay, but in many neighborhoods like East Salinas, it's where we have a large number of essential workers, families who live in congregate conditions, and who are most at risk of continue to have this virus spread among these disadvantaged communities. So it's really troubling, and a lot more work for us to do, even in Monterey County. The good thing that came out of this attention that we've been placing and efforts with the governor is the new testing sites, and they're located in Greenfield, in East Salinas at Alsa High, and Watsonville at the Ramsey Park Family Center, and including Gilroy and Hollister. The reason that's important is not only to ramp up our amount of testing, and now it's open to everyone. They don't have to show symptoms, but we're really trying to identify and test as many people as possible, because there is a large segment of the community who is asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. They're not showing symptoms, but they could be spreading the virus. So the more that the business community, our nonprofits, everyone across our community could help encourage people to get tested. One, it's going to help us keep these centers going in all these communities, because the numbers drop, the states could pull these testing centers out. The second part is to make sure our community is benefiting, especially our Latino communities and essential workers. And then thirdly, as you all know, the governor laid out the 4-stage process, and part of any city or any county being able to move and reopen in the future, they have to reach a certain testing threshold. So when I was talking to the chambers, I was talking to ag associations yesterday, it's in their interest, at least on the economic side, to also help encourage us to maximize the testing in our counties. Yesterday, there were a total now of 12 counties who did the self-attestation process. That means they certify that they've met all these different conditions the governor has required, so they can move quickly through stage 2 and hopefully into 3, which would allow them to reopen more businesses in their county. Most of all those are all small rural counties, but the testing is going to be a critical requirement for Santa Cruz County or Monterey County to be able to reopen in the future. I think what we're also doing right now is the county board of supervisors established ad hoc committees to start talking to different sectors of the community of how do we reopen businesses smart, strategic, promoting public health and safety. And because this is going to be a new reality for a while. And even if the shelter in place were to go away, there still has to be protocols all across the community to help reduce the risk of COVID spread. So, so we started ad hoc committees with agriculture, hospitality, nonprofits, other smaller businesses, the faith community, so all talking to get input of how they could function as we move into the later stages. So that's critical work that needs to happen now, but it also gives hope to those businesses that are struggling and hurting and might not survive this shutdown, to start knowing that their community leaders and elected leaders are having these conversations, and we're getting input by those who know best those particular businesses and sectors of the community. The other thing I want to talk about is on the legislative side. Luckily, having been the former chair of the California Latino Legislative Caucus, I still have a lot of my colleagues there. And that has helped facilitate some of the advocacy. Even though I'm at the county board of supervisors level now, I'm able to kind of talk to different legislators, asking them to help us at the local level with a lot of things that were needed. When they left and broke and shut down the legislative session in early April, the $1 billion deal relief package was done at the state with nothing for undocumented immigrants. And so I quickly was trying to, behind the scenes and in conversations, trying to advocate for this, what became the disaster relief fund for undocumented immigrants. But that should really, honestly, should have been taken care of during those first round of negotiations for a relief package. Luckily, it got accomplished because a lot of the work that we all did, pushing the state leaders to do that. But they're back in session now. But from what we hear, they're only moving bills related to COVID-19 relief, individual bills. They're going to come in August and do a bare bones budget that's required to be voted on by June 15th. But the chair of the Assembly Budget Committee, Phil Ting, said that they don't expect to really have a better outlook of what the budget looks like until they come back in August after the summer recess. So, but what is being told to legislators is that they expect a major budget deficit of $35 billion. So when it comes to nonprofit organizations and local governments, even though we had a major reserve of $18 billion, they expect that to be dried up very quickly, and that there is going to be major cuts coming, a lot of pain. So despite trying to get out of a shutdown, the budget outlook for the state looks very challenging. And so we're monitoring that very closely, because that impacts even us at local governments on the services that we provide, social services, childcare, a wide range of critical services for immigrant communities and other low-income families, because they're going to be the hardest hit even after we try to reopen our economy. So that's why I think it's important, like this large coalition that I see here, it's important that our local legislators hear from you, know that you guys are collaborating, organizing, advocating. But certainly I've done that regularly with Bill Monning and Assemblymember Rivas, who's been very responsive. I think he would be a big ally for you on the Assembly side, but also Senator Caballero and Mark Stone. These are all key people who need to hear and hear from you and be that local voice for those that often don't have it when it comes to public policy. I think in Monterey, despite our challenges, we've done some really, I think, key things, but it was because we started early. 3 days after we had our shelter-in-place order called for in Monterey County, 3 days later, we had actually the day after, we started meeting with our local ag associations because we were concerned about the impact among farm workers. And as you might have seen in the news, 40% of all the COVID positive cases in Monterey County are agricultural workers. That's not only farm workers, but that includes those who work in the coolers, the packing sheds. They could be working in marketing. They could be the farm labor contractors. It includes anybody who works in ag. But ag is only 20% of our workforce, but yet they're 40% of those who are testing COVID positive in Monterey County. But we expect that could have been much worse had we not done some early work and advocacy. So the day after we call a shelter-in-place order, Supervisor Lopez, who represents South Monterey County, and I got together with our Ag Commissioner, Henry Lopez, and you should all know who your Ag Commissioner is. I think in your county, it's Juan Hidalgo, whose office is right there at the Freedom Ag Commissioner's office, where the old courthouse used to be at. But we brought together the Farm Bureau, Grower Shippers, California Strawberry Commission, even our cannabis growers, the Coastal Growers Association, and our Wine Vendors and Growers Association. And we started working on advisory to try to create the best protocols and safety standards for agricultural workers in light of the COVID-19 crisis. And with their support, they pushed all their members to support it, to embrace it, and implement it. And that also led to advocating and getting agriculture support for working with us and pushing the legislature and the governor to also ask for the PPE, the personal protective equipment specifically for agricultural workers. And we got a big ask. Just last week, we got 750,000 masks. I think we got that many because of our work, whereas other counties like Riverside and Coachella Valley, I was talking to somebody member, Eduardo Garcia, they only got 12,000. But it's because sometimes if you're a voice early and you advocate and you make those relationships and pushing for resources for your community, you're able to get those delivered to you. So that was another good accomplishment in getting those masks. And now we're working with that trust and that working relationship that we built to make sure they're getting distributed, not only to the big farms, but also going to our small farmers like in Alba, the nonprofit here in Monterey County, and other small farmers, farmers markets. We're trying to also make sure we're reaching the smallest farmers in our county as well. But that has helped, we're facilitating that because we also have the support of the bigger ag associations that are helping us accomplish that. But also the other group in our community that often don't get championed for is the undocumented business owners. As we all know, the round 1 and 2 of the CARES federal funding totally excluded undocumented immigrants, those I-10 business owners. And so when it comes to the SBA small business loan or the PPP, the personal paycheck protection program, that's the forgivable loan that was available to a lot of small businesses. If they meet certain standards, that gets forgiven. None of our undocumented business owners qualify for any of that. So it was imperative for then local governments to try to step up and fill in where we could. And so we all have limited funding, but certainly Monterey County, we had $500,000 we could put available for all business owners that didn't qualify for small business loans. But working with El Pájaro CDC, Carmen Herrera, your local hero and champion there in Watsonville, she already had been doing some groundwork, working with the Community Foundation of Monterey County and Dan Baldwin, the executive director, and they lined it up to get an additional $1 million loan that was backed by the I-Bank of the state of California. They needed some admin funding, and because she had done that groundwork and my relationship with Carmen, I was able to then pull in the city of Salinas, the county, to put another $100,000 to get that program up and off the ground. So that's just another pool of another $1 million available for small businesses in Monterey County, and most of those are expected to be about 15,000 up to a maximum of 25,000, and that's critical because many of these are small businesses are barely surviving. Many might not be able to come back after things reopen up, and that's a reality for a lot of small businesses. But I think we need that kind of advocacy, and I think you have to find on the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors who could be those easy to go people, not only the supervisors, but their staff that your coalition could work with to kind of push some of these programs and try to draw down more resources. I think that has helped even at our food bank, where we know the food is drying up very quickly. I'm glad the governor committed to provide some additional state funding. There's a new program coming from the feds that's going to take some time. But just the Board of Supervisors, we know that that's the first line of defense in getting food out to people. We put in $500,000 so far, and we're going to put more. But that's where groups like this could really help push, even though it helps the general public, anybody who needs food. We know that most of those are going to be a lot of immigrant families and the lowest income families in our communities. But it really does help having that line of communications with the supervisors, and certainly with Greg Caput and his staff, and Zach Friend, who represents the north part of Watsonville, and certainly with all the other supervisors. I think you can find a lot of champions, but it's that communication that really helps facilitate them moving things, and this coalition proposing things that they could put on the agenda quickly and get some approval, whether it's a letter to the state on a particular issue or a budget item, or asking for more resources for our local community organizations that are being on the front line of giving the most critical resources to our families. So with that, I just want, thanks for letting me share a little bit about what we're doing on this side. But we are excited, even though I represent Salinas. I always look out, because of my hometown, I always look out for the residents of Pájaro, Las Lomas, Real Oaks, Moss Landing. And so there's a lot of collaboration there with Supervisor John Phillips, who represents just the other side of the river. But if there's anything I could do on this side and collaborating with you on Santa Cruz County, please count on me for that.
Thank you so much, Luis. It really, really is encouraging to know that we have such a strong and knowledgeable ally on the other side of the invisible border between Monterey County and Santa Cruz County. I definitely think you've given us a lot to think about, and I really appreciate the insight. we're just going to move directly into spending a few moments for Q&A. So I'll look back through the chat. Feel free to raise your hand as well if you know how to use that function and like that. And if you have any questions, you're also feel free to unmute yourself while I look through.
Hi, Hannah. This is Paz.
Hi, Paz.
I wanted to ask Luis Alejo a question about rental assistance, especially in the area of Las Lomas, Luis, one of the things that I'm seeing here, being the director of the housing programs for HeForCab, we hear a lot of folks from the Pájaro area, Las Lomas, Royal Oaks, needing assistance with rental assistance. Do you know if the county is doing anything or allocating additional money for those residents in that area?
Well, on housing assistance, housing in general in Monterey County, we had to reorganize our entire department. When I became a supervisor here, we had a team that wasn't really focused on really accomplishing much housing of anything. Since then, it took some time, but we reorganized. We got some new staff. We have a new housing director, Anastasia Wyatt, who came from the city of Salinas, a really pro-affordable housing and a champion, I think, for working people. So we got some better staff. And so we got a better line of communication. And despite our limited resources, trying to maximize what resources we could put out there for the community. But rental assistance is I think, because of the limited resources, it's a harder one. I don't see many county or local governments having the resources to be able to do much of that because it dries up very quickly. But certainly it's something that we could be looking at. But at what the focus has been with now at this point has been creating those alternative housing sites for families that are exposed to COVID. And even that took a lot of time and planning, and because you always get pushback from NIMBYism of communities that don't want sick people near where they're being housed, including providing alternative housing for H2A and other agricultural workers who cannot go back to their homes because of the exposure to others. But the rental assistance is one that's on our plate. We have to do more there. There's definitely a need. Luckily, the courts, the Judicial Council of California, complemented the many of the eviction moratoriums that local governments put in place. The Judicial Council put an order that they were not going to process any eviction orders during the shelter-in-place order and 90 days after. But it doesn't make the accumulated debt go away from the many families who have maybe a month, two, maybe at the end of this 3 or more months behind. So they're going to be at risk of eviction and being in a lot of debt. That's going to be one of those advocacy issues that we need to work on in the budget with the state leaders. Because look at the city of Watsonville, the county Monterey is in the same boat. We're expected to have some major deficits ahead of us, but that's where we could be pushing for the state to provide some rent relief for families. And that's certainly something that I think the state could work with us on.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Luis. And it's good seeing you. And however we can help or assist or advocate for that section of the area, it's South County, Pájaro. We consider that South County. It's just that borderline that divides us. And right now, I think people really need the help in that area.
Thank you, Paz. I'll look closer at that as well. Thank you for raising that with me.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question about worker protection?
Go ahead, Paul.
Hey, Luis. It's good to hear about your outreach to employers early on. But of course, we know there are a lot of small employers who aren't necessarily reached that way. And there's a need for very specific guidance, as we're hearing nationally, right? And also the workers need a voice. So I guess my question is, is the public health officer or is your task force putting into place specific guidance for reopening, especially in the dangerous conditions of the packing sheds, which may become, they may become our our meatpacking plants for the, in terms of being hotspots? And also, are the unions at the table? The workers obviously need a voice. It can't just be voluntary.
Yeah, all good questions. If anybody was watching what's happening in the meat processing industry, we have one of those cases in California in Hanford in Kings County. There's a meat processing plant of 900 workers, and Kings County has a spike in COVID cases because of that. Most of those are Latino immigrant workers in that processing plant. So I've been watching other counties because we're learning and hopefully not repeating what's happening in other places and trying to do a better job. But yes, beyond the ag associations, we've been in touch with the 3 unions that represent the large number of agricultural workers. That is, the largest 2 is UFCW5 and Teamsters 890. And then third is United Farm Workers. But yes, we've been in touch with all 3 leaders of all of them, and we're in constant touch on a weekly basis, even with them. But so far, in terms of compliance with that advisory, when we hear cases that of non-compliance, I've been able to call, like, for example, the grower shippers and said, we're not hearing this company is not doing that. And they quickly get on them and turn things around. But we also have the support of our ag commissioner to be able to help. I did even advocate, and I pushed our health officer to make that advisory mandatory. So it wasn't voluntary. It was going to have more teeth behind it. So far, I haven't been able to convince him to do that. But it's something that I push for. You can't hurt by asking. But because of our high numbers, I wanted that to be mandatory. So there's more work to be done there. But that's something that could be done. Even early on, when we started doing our work, I reached out to Santa Cruz County, to Carlos Palacios, Felipe on the city council, because I was hoping that Santa Cruz County would be doing that. And I heard that that's being done now, but I just don't hear of that work being publicized or an advisory coming out of Santa Cruz County. But that's where we could talk to the CEO of the county and to the ag commissioner to help have those conversations take place.
We need to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I talked to Carlos, I think about 3 weeks ago. He said that the meetings had just started then. But I told him it'd be good to invite some other people to the table as well. That way there's more community participation. And it's a help. I think even for our ag associates have embraced the community feedback. Even we've done already like 20 different amendments to it because we're revising it, we're strengthening it as we get more feedback and input. But that's certainly another effort that I think needs to take place for ag workers in Santa Cruz County.
I will just interject, Paul and Luis, that there is a ongoing meeting with the ag commissioner that is actually in conflict with today's meeting. And so we can share that information, and then we have to readjust our scheduling, but it's happening.
Okay, good. That's good to know.
I believe we have room for a couple more questions.
I think there's a really important question that Elaine from SCORE put up, and Luis, we'd like to hear. We know that locally, CAB, the county, the city of Watsonville have been really moving our census work, and that in our shelter in place, it's been difficult, right? We have to get innovative. We have to think about how we reach our immigrant community. And so I want to invite Luis to respond what you're seeing. How have the strategies pivoted for census outreach? And Rebecca, if you want to share any information from the city perspective, or Aurelio from the local perspective. So we'll start off with Luis, and then we'll turn it over to Rebecca or Aurelio if you want to jump in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And I do want to commend my colleagues in the city of Watsonville, because you guys have done a lot of good work. And some of the efforts you've done, I've been able to push in Monterey County to get my colleagues to do the same. So keep that up. But on the census, it's troubling. We just had the Secretary of Commerce call Mayor Gunter and Salinas personally. He called 100 cities that had really low rates so far of filling out their census form. That was, I believe, last Friday or Thursday. But I think on the census tracker, there's a online URL where you could go and you could type in the state, you could look at your county, and you could look at your city, and you could see exactly a daily update of how many people have filled out the census. And for Monterey County, I think we're now at 54, 55%. but the city of Salinas was just under, I think, 49. It just got to 50, but far below where we should be at this point. And I think that's something where a lot of elected officials and community leaders should be looking at that progress weekly, because there's still a lot of work to be done. I think the deadline was extended to the end of October now, but there has to be a lot more effort, a lot more PR and outreach, and so far we've been able to partner, especially with our Spanish language media, Univision and Telemundo. Those relationships really make a big difference, because when we're trying to highlight and getting the word out to the community, it's those press contacts that really help amplify our voice and our concerns and really make it an education tool. But there's a lot more, and I'm appreciative that in Natividad Hospital we have an indigenous language program where we could convert some of those to unique needs in our county. But looking at our numbers, we still need a lot more work for us to do. So we're trying to rethink of how we could re-energize and strategize, especially encouraging families that as they're at home, this is the best time, if they're wanting to help their communities, that this is the best time to be able to do that. But for California, there's a lot on the line. We're at risk of losing a congressional seat with the rates that we have now. So just in terms of representation in Congress, and not to mention the billions that could be lost, have to, I think, work. But I think there's been a good strategizing between all 30 counties from the very beginning. But here we are at this point in time, and we just have to kind of assess where we're at and how we could better message our community to fill that short 9-question questionnaire.
Thank you, Luis. Mayor Garcia, would you like to add something about locally? I know there's all kinds of things happening.
Well, not as much as used to be happening before COVID. Our Complete Count Committee was really doing a lot of very innovative activities, which included attending every single open house with a district, and also going out in groups to our hard to count areas and leaving flyers on the doorsteps or door knobs of our hard to count people. But because of COVID-19, we had to stop all that type of work. And so the most recent thing that we did was a car caravan with one of the tracks, because we have several tracks in terms of hard to count. And so with our car caravans, and actually many of them got split up and went to many different types of neighborhoods that we hadn't targeted, but some neighborhoods got to see our advocacy in terms of you need to complete your census. And so we're